Welcome to our Line Opinion panelists for our first in-person line panel in more than 2 years, and it's a good one. CEO of Girl Scouts of New Mexico and former New Mexico cabinet member Rebecca Latham is with us. Also here is Dan McKay, reporter from the Albuquerque Journal, who did some great work during this cycle, and former New Mexico State Senator Dede Feldman. Thank you all for being with us today. Now, we're focusing exclusively on the election this week here on the line, and we start with the governor's race. This one ended a lot earlier than some folks might have predicted, with GOP challenger Mark Ronchetti conceding the race before 11 o'clock on election night. And during our coverage, former state representative Daniel Foley was here, and he put it to the Republican Party for failing the messaging battle in several key races. Rebecca, I'm going to ask you this, including this one. Where do you think, just in general terms, Mr. Ronchetti's camp went wrong here? Something didn't quite hold, or bite, I should say, and then hold for his messaging.
Well, I think it's, I think he just kind of got pigeonholed into this lack of leadership and then abortion. Right. And, you know, it's like once we learned what was really tracking with New Mexico voters, especially New Mexico women, right, it was going to be hard, if not impossible, for him to back out of that. I think what he did in trying to say we're going to do a constitutional amendment and we're going to bring it to the voters was his way of saying, hey, even if I'm elected, I can't get this through anyway. But you can't say that. So I think he was just put in a really difficult position. Also, there's a lot of muck in the Republican Party in New Mexico, and so he didn't have the best guidance or the best backing. Right. So I think
it was not exactly a full-throated support for Mr. Ronchetti from the rest of the GOP here, was it?
No, starting with the convention, yeah, and the fact that Mark Ronchetti told all of the delegation, don't vote for me, let's get more Republicans in this, you know, like vote for everybody else. And it just I think he had a very tough road to hoe. But with that being said, I think he ran a great campaign. I think he got a lot closer than anyone expected him to get, and he deserves some credit for that.
There you go. Senator, interesting quote here from Milan Simonich. You know him, of course. A quote: for an experienced television performer, he, being Mr. Ronchetti, failed to make a clear case for himself. Lujan Grisham caught a break. Ronchetti's negatives outpaced her own. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yeah. And I feel that he ran an extremely negative campaign that was based on fear, primarily. I mean, his TV advertising about the early release of a man who then went on really was shades of Willie Horton and the Lee Atwater Republican approach to base everything on fear about crime, about inflation, and it just didn't stick. And I think people are turned off by that kind of campaigning. And Michelle Lujan Grisham had a positive message about what she had accomplished in terms of education, in terms of health care, in terms of the pandemic, saving lives and sparing New Mexicans, cutting taxes, giving rebates. She had a record to run on, and it was a good one. He did not have a record, and he did not say what he would do.
That's right.
Instead, he just said, ain't it awful? Right. And it's her fault.
Right. Let me ask you to pick up on something Rebecca mentioned as well, is Mr. Ronchetti needed to have something from women this cycle. Was there anything else he could have done after he got buried by that Pastor Smotherman revelation? Was there anything he could have done in hindsight to get past that?
That was unforced error, yeah, on his mistake, on his watch, and it would be tough. But I think to run a positive campaign on what he would do, right, rather than an ain't it awful and you should fear for the very worst.
Yeah. He never flipped the script, in other words, as the kids say. Exactly right. Dan, interestingly, there are folks out there, the economy was a big deal for a lot of folks. You see all the polling, even here in New Mexico. I got to wonder, from your view, did Mr. Ronchetti hit that hard enough, and was there anything there for New Mexicans? Was that a movable needle, so to speak, the economy here? I got to include inflation in there as well.
Yeah, I think so. There are certainly all kinds of factors at play in this race. I think that a president being in the White House generally, a Democrat in the White House generally is good for Republicans at the midterm, or vice versa. So I think that was a benefit to Ronchetti. I think the Roe v. Wade decision was a benefit to Lujan Grisham. But in the end, he did come within 6 points. That is a much more competitive race than there was 4 years ago. And I think it's pretty clear that voters are concerned about the economy. They certainly are very sensitive to inflation, gas prices. He tried to harness those issues to his benefit, and he just didn't get all the way there, but it was certainly a competitive race.
Yeah. Rebecca, interestingly, Mr. Ronchetti was 3 points behind the governor, and then he got an endorsement from Donald Trump. And then it fell to like 6 points, and it finished out right around 6 points, or even just a little bit more. I'm curious your take on the Trump endorsement. What happened there?
So I often refer to New Mexico as bizarro world when it comes to politics. If Trump is endorsing candidates everywhere else and gives them a huge boost, sure. Trump's endorsing candidates here, and it's not doing that here. I think that Mr. Ronchetti really did try to separate himself from Donald Trump, especially after the Senate race. Mm-hmm. I do, however, I do want to address, though, I think it's just interesting to me that how we can see the same commercials and see two completely different things based on our own experiences. And to the senator's point about running a fearful campaign, based on scare tactics, I felt that could have gone both ways. I feel like both of them used a lot of scare tactics, but what I saw that really stuck out to me was on election night. I'm a sports mom, so I use a lot of sports analogies. And when the governor stepped up to the podium to accept the victory, I was really kind of turned off by her nanny boo boo. I would have that would have been a flag on the play. That would have been excessive celebration. That would have been taunting. We teach our kids to be better, and like our coach says to our kids, when you get to the end zone, act like you've been there before. Right. And I was just a little put off by what I really wanted to hear was a message of, while 48% of you voted against me, I feel like there's more that brings us together than what separates us. And I'm going to be your governor that's going to bring us together. But she didn't. She said, those who voted against me are horrible, awful people. And our victory represents that we, good over bad. You don't tell half of your constituency that they're bad. So that just was, to me, again, I understand what thing resonates with me doesn't resonate with Senator, but I wanted to see a little more a unifying message at that moment.
Well, just on that point, and I agree that she went overboard there, but listen to Ronchetti's concession speech about how he was walking God's path. Yes. And the people, and now New Mexico would be taking another path, not God's path, but another path, and he just wished them well. Mm-hmm. So I think there's blame to go around here, and both of them could have done better. Interesting point there.
Dan, a lot of money was spent in this race, this governor's race. Ronchetti raised over $9 million. That's a lot of money for a challenger around here, a lot of money. So it can't be that. It can't be they didn't have enough money for enough messaging. But after this race, where are we now with gubernatorial races? New high water mark? We should expect more money at this point? Are we going to fall back to a more mellow race next time around? I doubt that.
Yeah, it certainly seems like the races get increasingly expensive. There's a lot at stake in these races. Mm-hmm. There's also it's big business. You have a lot of consulting companies that are based around running elections every year. And so, yeah, certainly it was an expensive race. Ronchetti even outraised the governor in certain critical periods down the stretch. But she obviously had a huge head start, having been in office for 4 years. But yeah, these are expensive campaigns, and I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah, $12.5 million for the governor, Senator. That's a lot of money.
Well, and the outside money. There was a $11.3 million spent by the Democratic forces. A stronger New Mexico, and then the Republican Governors Association, they spent 6 million. So, I mean, it's really getting up there, but it's not as expensive as in other states.
Good point. Yeah, for perspective, exactly right. Rebecca, I'm curious again, for the Republican Party, there's work to do to pick up the pieces, so to speak, and money is a big part of that. Are there folks in place now who can raise this kind of money again after such a defeat? Do you know what I mean here? Something just doesn't seem quite clicking here on the Republican side of things here.
I feel like Mark Ronchetti was the Republican Party's best shot as far as a fundraiser. Personally, and I will say this speaking on behalf of the thousands of members of the Republican Party who are now not affiliated or now registered as independents, that the Republican Party leadership in New Mexico is just not cutting it. You know, we need leaders. We need not two. We need multiple healthy parties. I think Canada has five major parties. We need a lot of major parties. But like we're, you know, like right now, where we are shift in such a huge majority of Democratic elected officials, like we're not going to have a balance for a while. And I don't know how we're ever going to get back there. And this Republican leadership has not demonstrated that they know how to get us back.
Right. How many more? You know, I don't want you to speak for the Republican Party, but when you see this as a strong Democrat, Senator, happy days for Democrats, knowing the other side just doesn't have a bench or money or cohesion. There's a lot of missing pieces there on the other side, so to speak.
Yeah, but you know, if you have a large majority in the legislature, a large Democratic majority, there are also opportunities for factions there.
Right.
And it also, in some ways, when you have a small Republican minority, that they harden, and they are unwilling to compromise in any respect. Right. And because of the institutional setup in the legislature, they can slow things down, and you know, it doesn't really matter how many there are. If there's one person that's willing to filibuster for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, because they're mad at the Democrats, they're going to do it.
Right.
You know, so there needs to be. We need some kind of realignment here. We need some reforms that ease partisanship. And make it so that people can come together on those things that they agreed on, and there are many that are agreed upon.
Good point there. Thanks to the Line Opinion panel. We'll be right back here. The table for a discussion on the race, nail-biting upset in CD2. Very interesting race down there. And I'll ask where the Republican challengers in Districts 1 and 3 went wrong as well.